Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate the introduction. I obviously appreciate the wonderful response. For those of you who are wondering about the orange tie, I have a brother named Dan. Dan is the same age as I am today. We were born 11 months apart, so we share the same age for a month. And my brother is a Florida Gator, so on his birthday... So on his birthday, I wear an orange and blue tie. So, and I happen to be in Florida, so it made it all the more appropriate. So, it is great to be here. Thank you, thank you so much. It's been great to get around and meet so many of you, and I look forward to meeting even more of you afterwards. I just wanted to come and say thank you. I have an opportunity to speak to a lot of pro-life groups, and in particular, get an opportunity to speak to a lot of pregnancy centers. And I just can't tell you, as someone who has been out in the vineyards for over 20 years now on this issue, how important the work that you are doing here is, not just to the pro-life movement, but to a country that is struggling with the truth, struggling with right and wrong. And you have done something in this movement that has truly been remarkable. If you go back in the 1970s and look at all the publications after Roe versus Wade, even look at the political discourse, there was a conclusion that was being drawn. And once the United States Supreme Court decided Roe versus Wade, that the issue of abortion would eventually, as generations go on and the old folks with the old values go off into the sunset, that America would have this enlightened position and everybody would come together and embrace this new truth. Everybody believed it. Most political parties began to even waffle on it. One political party completely abandoned life. The other one was sort of shaky on it. And throughout the course of the next 20 years, I would say, there was a lot of anger and consternation between the two sides. And we were losing ground. Just about every single poll showed that throughout the 1970s and 1980s, we were losing ground on the issue of abortion. And then a couple of things happened. One I'll discuss a little later. But the second one is who we're talking about here tonight. These pregnancy centers began to pop up. People began to recognize that standing in protest and pointing fingers and condemning people and being mountaintop moralizers was not winning converts to the position. That there was a better approach. And the approach was truth and love. Was doing exactly what our Savior did, was to go out and embrace people and to love them unconditionally. What happens at the Women's Health Center every day, as well as hundreds of similar centers across this country, is that people go to work to meet the people in the triage unit of society. People who come through those doors who have been abandoned, lied to, abused, been told countless times the lie about what is in their womb, about their own self-worth. And we are there to do one thing and one thing only. We're there to love them. You heard Patty talk about how she embraces not just the people who come and decide to have their baby, but embraces even those that don't. Embraces not just the baby, but they embrace the mother who many times ends up back for counseling. We all know, because we've seen it in our own lives, the transformative nature of the love of Jesus Christ. We've seen it. And what this ministry does, and this is important to understand, this is a ministry because it is, in fact, showing to the world the love of Jesus, the love of each and every one of you who are here supporting the center for those who are the most damaged by our culture. What you're doing here is full of grace. What you're doing here is truly blessed. You are a beacon of light in an ever-darkening world, and you're making a difference. Do you realize that the current generation of young people, the millennials, are one of the most pro-life generations in America today? Maybe some polls, the most pro-life generation. Now, why is that? Is it because they've learned that at school? They learned it in college? They learned it in the popular culture? They learned it in the news media? No. What they learned is several things. Number one, they walk by that picture on their refrigerator of them in their mother's womb, and they see the truth. This generation, more than any generation, is a visual generation. One of the reasons that 80% of these mothers who come in and have these sonograms don't abort their child is because they can't deny what they see. And what they see is themselves in that position. They also know, do you realize there are hundreds of thousands of kids in America today who are alive because of pregnancy centers just like this? These are witnesses among them. They are witnesses for life. They are pro-life because they are survivors of abortion. And they have the courage to go out because it's personal to fight. Every child you save is a witness. Every child you save is a light. Every child you save is one step closer for America to be good and whole again. Because America will never be whole. America will never be good if America continues to kill its children. We ask God to bless this country and then have to pause and say, how can He? How can He bless a country that is now systematically, over the course of now 40 years, walked away from His truth? You know, one of my favorite sayings is, every day we get up and we tell ourselves lies so we can live. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a time in America we could afford to tell ourselves lies and just live. Just go on and everything would be okay. You do not live in such a time. I think we all know that. We all try to believe, well, it's just the pendulum swinging. Really? Do you really believe the pendulum is swinging? Or do you think we're on a slope? I think the pendulum analogy may have worked in the past. It doesn't work anymore. Nothing's swinging back. Yes, we're winning the life fight. But if we lose, as we are, begin to lose all these other fights, that life fight's going to be a hard one to win down the road. And so I'm going to challenge you. But I want to show you, through me, a horribly imperfect vessel, how God can work through you to save His country. You see, in 1995, I came to the United States Senate, and I found the Lord. Now, a lot of people don't think He lives in the Senate. Now, I say that for a reason. I came to the United States Senate. Now, you mean you weren't a Catholic? You weren't a Christian? Yeah, I was a Catholic. I went to Catholic schools. I was raised a Catholic. If you'd have asked me a test on the catechism of the church, I would have been able to answer all those questions at least 95% right. I could check the box. But you see, what I did as a Catholic was a part of my life that I did on Sunday and when other instances in which I was going to practice my faith. It wasn't at the center of my life. Christ was not at the center of my life. My faith was not it was not what drove me. I came to the United States Senate and two things happened. Number one, I was walking down the hallway outside the majority leader's office, and another senator came up to me, put his arm on my shoulder and said, "How would you like to come to a Bible study?" Now, I'd maybe been to one or two Bible studies throughout the course of my 36 years at that point. But I thought to myself, okay, I just won 3 elections in 4 years, and I've come from nowhere to now I'm in the United States Senate, but now I got a 6-year term. So, okay, maybe I can take a little time. Maybe I can take an hour off every week and go to a Bible study. Well, the person teaching that Bible study was an amazing teacher. He was the chaplain of the Senate. His name was Lloyd Ogilvie. He had a profound impact on taking the words in the Scripture and applying it to me as someone in my life at this time in the United States Senate. Then the second thing happened. Karen and I decided we were going to move our family to be where I was going to be most of the time, almost all the time, which was in Washington. We didn't want to do it. We moved from Pittsburgh. And we looked around. We didn't like the church we went to. So we ended up finding another church, St. Catherine of Siena, not the one here. I know I was going to get a shout out from Orange Park, but I went to a church, St. Catherine of Siena, and I sat in the pew and I listened to this priest. And he blew my socks off. He preached the gospel like I'd never heard any priest preach the gospel. It just hit me. It was so true. It was so full of truth and love and passion. And I'll never forget walking out of that church, and I was so angry. I was so angry that it took 37 years to have a priest preach the gospel to me. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the Eucharist, and that's everything. But in the world today, if we don't have the Word communicated the way Christ communicated it, to reach people not just here, but here and everywhere else. I will say this because I know there's a lot of clergy here. I can't tell you the number of masses I go to where I just feel like someone's mailing it in. I give a lot of speeches. I've had people say, boy, it must tire you out to give speeches like that. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a country that's hurting. We have people that are falling away to darkness. And we have far too many people who aren't fighting for their souls and fighting for our country. If you're not prepared to preach the truth and truly try to move and grab people every Sunday, every daily Mass, then let's find somebody who will. Because our Lord and our country needs it. Someone touched me, and that's why I'm here. Imagine the power that the church used to have. You know, I run a movie company right now called Echo Light Studios. We take our movies, which are good quality theatrical movies, and I decided instead of running them through the theaters, I opened up a new distribution network. It's called Churches. So we show our movies, first-run movies, through churches. That's where we premiere them. Why? Because I read a statistic, a survey, last year. This organization called Barna, which does a lot of surveys on religion and faith in America. They said they've been doing this survey for 50 years, and 50 years ago, the number one most influential institution in the country, 50 years ago, was the church. Do you know what it is today? Number 16. What's first? Movies. This stuff. How do we let that happen? Do something. Do something. So I decided I'm going to bring the movies to the church. And if the church won't preach the truth, by the way, they also did a survey where they asked pastors of all denominations whether they believed in biblical truth on a variety of these issues. Marriage, life, a whole bunch of other things. And 90% of pastors in America said they held biblical worldviews on all of these issues. Then they asked this question: how many of you ever preach on any of these issues on Sundays? 90% don't. Now we know why they're number 16. Because they don't preach the truth. So here's what I found out once I learned the truth, once I felt called. I dug into my faith, and I found out this little truth, that God speaks in whispers. And unless you're really close, you don't hear what he wants you to do in your life. I got close, and I ended up going from a guy who would never say the word abortion to, within a year of that transformation, I was managing the bill of partial birth abortion on the floor of the United States Senate. And I can tell you miracle after miracle that happened on the floor of the Senate. Miracles that happened during those debates. I can tell you so many other things that have happened in standing up. I can also tell you that the cross is real. That standing for his truth will get society to hate you and persecute you. The cross is real and the splinters are painful. But it is so worth it. God will be faithful. Mother Teresa says that God does not call on us to be successful. He calls on us to be faithful. I have lost and lost and lost. We're not winning a lot of battles, ladies and gentlemen, overall in America today. I've lost not just battles, but races. I've lost all sorts of other things. But God has been so faithful. He has blessed me so much. After the first debate, 1996, I fought hard, had amazing things happen. I said something on the floor of the Senate because Senator Feinstein and Senator Boxer, who were arguing against me, said that we needed to keep this abortion procedure legal because late in pregnancy, sometimes mothers would find out that the child they were expecting was not healthy, was going to be blind or have other types of problems. I remember getting up on the floor of the Senate and saying, you know, my wife is pregnant. She's almost 20 weeks. We go in for a sonogram at the end of the week. I have no idea whether our child will be healthy or not. But if I find out that my child isn't healthy, what am I going to do? Kill him? What are we saying to men and women, mothers and fathers, that if your child isn't healthy, everybody's better off if they're dead? Later that week, we went in for that sonogram, and the sonographer looked over at us and said, your child has a fatal defect and is going to die. Try that on for, thank you, Lord, for being here at my side while I'm being faithful to you. I was so mad. I was distraught. We had our little kids there at the time. We cried. We got out of the car. We pulled over. I couldn't see. We just cried, and then I just got angry. I said, I have stood up and I did what you called me to do. I took that risk. I put my neck out there. And this is your answer. You're going to take my son. So we did everything we could. We actually had intrauterine surgery up in Philadelphia. Amazing. And it worked. And 2 days later, I was on my way to Erie, Pennsylvania, and I got a call. And the call was from my sister-in-law. She said, you got to get home. Karen has a fever. I knew what that meant. She had an infection in her womb from the surgery. Later that night, our little boy was born. Far too young to survive. He miraculously lived 2 hours. We held him. He was so tiny. We held him during that time. We could see his heart beating in his chest. That's how little he was. And I kept watching that heart. Slow down, and then it stopped. Where is this faithful God I was thinking of? Then a miracle happened. Miracle is my wife, who is my miracle in my life. She always kept a diary of all of our kids from the moment we found out that we were pregnant. And she kept writing through all of the travails that we were going through and kept writing afterwards. Her mother read those letters and encouraged her to publish them, which we did in a book called Letters to Gabriel. That book sold over 25,000 copies. We got thousands of letters. We still get them today. Of the lives that were saved because of our little boy and his witness and our witness to God's love. God was faithful. Even through the pain, God will be faithful. I finished up my Senate career losing by the largest margin of any incumbent senator in 30 years. I had carried the marriage amendment. We had one time the Senate voted, twice actually, the Senate voted on marriage, on an amendment to the Constitution, and I forced the vote both times. I am telling you, you will pay a price. You will pay a price. And so I thought I was done with politics. I thought I was done with having kids. I was wrong. 2 years after we got out of politics, after we had decided we couldn't have any more children, we were at that age and gave away all our baby stuff, Karen got pregnant. So Abraham and Sarah, I will tell you my age. I'm not allowed to tell Karen's. I was 52. Excuse me, 50, not 52, 50, when our little Bella was born. And she was born with a condition called trisomy 18, which means that she has an extra 18th chromosome in every cell of her body. And when the doctor walked in 4 days after she was born and told us that, he said, your child is going to die. It's just a matter of days, weeks, maybe months. You look it up in the dictionary and it says incompatible with life. In fact, she was just lucky to be alive because 90% of these kids don't even survive birth. And so here you are again, confronting this horrible death of a child. In fact, we took our baby Bella home on hospice care. But Karen was convicted that Bella had survived for a reason. and that God was going to create a miracle through her, I wasn't quite as hopeful. I had locked into the fact that Bella was like our other boy, Gabriel, that I would accept whatever God's will is. And I would be okay with that because he proved his faithfulness to me. And then I knew from Gabriel, one of the great lessons I learned, that the most important thing as a father, the most important thing as a father is to what? Shepherd your child to heaven. I have a child in heaven. And I was going to have another child in heaven, and I was okay. At least that's what I thought. But Karen wasn't okay. We had a very, very different view of things. And it didn't lead to a very pleasant interaction. Because I was way too calm, way too cool, way too at peace. Just last couple months ago, we published a book called Bella's Gift, where we lay out in raw detail that conflict, because I was coming from a completely different spiritual place. I'll give you a story that probably sums it up best. We got home from the nursery after 10 days in the ICU. Karen said, okay, it's time to set up the nursery. I said, well, she's only 3 pounds. She's in a bassinet. She probably isn't going to need a nursery for a long time. So I ordered a crib, and it came, and we started setting up. And it was my daughter, Elizabeth, who at the time was 18. So we were there unpacking the boxes. And as we were unpacking them, I saw Elizabeth tearing them. I said, careful, Elizabeth. We'll need to save those boxes. Now, I'm the practical guy, right? Chances are we're never going to use this crib. That's what was going on in my mind. My daughter looked at me, and she said, you don't believe in her. She ran over to those boxes and started ripping them into shreds. Bella's going to be 7 in May. Well, I decided to run for president. I mean, that's what you do when you lose a Senate race by the largest margin of any incumbent senator in 30 years. People ask me, why did I do that? I say, first, because of Bella. We detail in great detail in the book of how we had to fight for her care. Doctors didn't want to provide care because, well, she's going to die, and frankly, she can't do much. She's mentally and physically impaired tremendously. And so there was a fight always to get her care. And I would go to Trisomy 18 conferences and support groups, and they would have people from all over the world and tell their stories, and the stories were horrific. In countries with socialized medicine, how these children were uniformly denied care and allowed to die. And I said, I can't let that happen, as Obamacare was being debated. So I went out and just started giving speeches, talking about it, trying to get anywhere. Got on the radio, got on TV. Then I was at CPAC, and I was asked by a group to come and speak in Iowa. And I said, okay, I'll do it. So late in 2009, I decided to go to Iowa, and about a week or so before the speech, I do a press release like I did with all my talks, where I go anywhere and announce where I'm going to go. And a press reporter from Politico calls me and says, I see you're going to Iowa. I said, yeah, I'm giving a speech to this group. They asked me to come and speak. And they said, well, you're running for president. I said, well, I'm just a group asked me to come and speak, and I'm going to speak. I mean, I'm going to go to Illinois the next day and speak there. He said, oh, so you're not running for president? I said, well, I didn't say I was running or I'm not running. I'm just going to give a speech. Oh, so you are running for president? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, nobody goes to Iowa unless you're running for president. And I said, well, look, I'm not going for that. I am not going for that. I'm just going. So later that night, I'm sitting at home and actually in my mother and father-in-law's house, and next thing I know, we're watching Fox News, having conversation, and the next thing I know, I hear my mother-in-law scream. And she yells, "Look, you're running for president." And on the crawl on Fox, there was a story in the front page of Politico that Santorum going to Iowa considering run for president. So I show up in Iowa the next week, packed house, C-SPAN cameras, national media everywhere, and I'm thinking, this is a good gig. If you want to get your word out, this is the way to do it. Say you're going to run for president, or at least postulate that you are. So I went to New Hampshire, same thing, South Carolina. So what happened? Well, I just kept traveling. I didn't know, it didn't make any sense. Fox News the summer before the election, about this time, actually a few months after this time, if you think about it, in 2012, this had been in 2011, they profiled the 15 top candidates for president. I don't even think I had made 20. And so what did I do? I felt like God had called me to defend my little girl and others like her, to fight for things that nobody else wanted to talk about, to speak the truth. And so what I did is I got in a car and traveled around Iowa, did 385 town hall meetings, average attendance 12 people. People would ask me, why would you keep going? Because I said, well, of the 12 people that showed up, usually 8 to 10 would say they'd help. I don't need a lot of encouragement. And so now we're heading into the final weeks right before the caucus. It's the first week of January in 2012. Every other candidate had been at the top. Everyone who had entered into the race had been at the top of the list, had been leading the race except one. And so here it is a month before, and all of the media is asking me the same question as I'm traveling around Iowa. Aren't you embarrassed? I mean, everybody else but you. Isn't this embarrassing? Why are you still doing this? Why don't you quit? Who are you going to endorse? You're obviously not going to win. You're at 3 and 4%. You're at 1 or 2% in the national polls. You haven't raised any money. I just said, I have faith that if you go out and you work hard and you speak the truth, you trust the people, that amazing things can happen. Well, a week before the election, a poll came out for the first time, a little over a week and a half, for the first time, had me at 10%, 10 days before the election. 5 days later, it was at 16%. 4 days later, I was at 21%. 2 days later, I was at 25%. And I won the Iowa caucus. I spent 20 cents a vote. To give you an idea, Rick Perry spent $478 a vote. God will be faithful if you are faithful. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm nothing special. I'm someone who has no business running for president, had no business running for the House of Representatives and winning. But I got close enough to listen to what God's call on my life was. One of my favorite stories is a story about G.K. Chesterton. Chesterton was asked by a London tabloid, a liberal tabloid in London at the turn of the last century. He was asked if he would write an article for this liberal tabloid, since he was a big social critic of the left. And the title of the article was to be, "What's Wrong with the World?" They thought they'd make fun of him as he would list all the horrible things that are going on in the world. He said, okay, I'll do it. And the next day he submitted his essay. And here's what it said. What's wrong with the world? I am. Respectfully submitted, G.K. Chesterton. Ladies and gentlemen, you can look around and you can talk about all the horrible things that are happening in America today. You can talk about the fact that we don't teach the truth in our schools anymore, that we've allowed the Bible and truth to be driven out, character education, virtue. You can talk about the cesspool that popular culture is. You can talk about the decline of higher education. How many of you people give to those schools that lie to our children and indoctrinate them with lies? How many of you give to them because you like their football program? What's wrong with the world? How many of you at your businesses, when they pass personnel policies that are lies, speak up? What's wrong with the world? How many of you in your social circles self-censor because you don't want to be controversial? What's wrong with the world? How many of you in your political life think, well, we have to be for someone who's electable? We have to sacrifice our values because, we can't win anymore. What's wrong with the world? We are at a time in our country's history where America needs you. The world needs you. Fight for truth. At the end of the campaign in Iowa, on a Sunday, I went to a church, evangelical church, spoke at it, and the pastor walked up to me afterwards and he handed me a little box. It looked like a box of cufflinks. Opened it up, and there were two little round, looked like coins, but they were green and they were sort of etched. I couldn't even tell if they were metal. I looked at them and, what do you do? So I said, thank you. He said, do you know what they are? Busted. I said, no. What are they? He said, when I saw these this morning when I came up to do this service, I saw them on my bookshelf. I purchased these when I was in Jerusalem. And I saw them there and I thought of you. I thought of you traveling around the state of Iowa, 300 and whatever town hall meetings. Nobody paying attention to you. Everybody ridiculing you. The elite class not mentioning you, making fun of you. But you decided to go out there and be faithful and give everything. Give it all. He says, I'm here to tell you that God will bless that. Because he told us he would bless that. These are widows' mites. And they're 2,000 years old. In the Bible, the Lord said, the widow who gave that mite gave more than everybody else. So when you sit there tonight and you say, well, I'm only one person. I only have limited resources. I really can't make a difference, so I won't. So I just won't. I'll just care, but I won't give it all. Do you really think that the secular left in America today is not giving it all? They don't quit. I feel like when I'm in the battles in America today, I feel like Frodo. Because I think of the evil eye. That evil eye. Do you notice the unusual anatomical characteristic of that eye in The Lord of the Rings? There's something unusual about that eye. You know what it was? It didn't have an eyelid. It didn't sleep. It didn't stop. It was constant. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to win the fight all the time. We're going to lose most of the time because we are broken. That is humanity. But with his help, there isn't a fight that we can't be victorious in. But we have to give it all. Tonight, you're going to be asked to give. I know many of you came in here thinking, well, here's what I can afford to give. God will bless everything. Women's Help Center will appreciate everything. But as I said at the beginning of my speech, you are giving to something that is one of the most effective causes for truth and light in America, not just in your community. And you have an opportunity to do something tonight. I hope that's not all you do, but I hope you begin tonight in doing something great. Maybe someday, as you commit yourself to giving it all for the truth, for him and his glory, maybe one of these priests out here will hand you a little box. And say, well done, good and faithful servant. Thank you for helping to save America. God bless you.